had spent a lot of time talking one-on-one with founders, and I had also gotten to speak to a lot of investors, and somebody maybe thought I could be an investor, and I like all the different places in the ecosystem. But I thought what's really missing is actually just a very simple thing, which is to make people see the link between if you invest into women's health, you will make money and the planet will be a healthier place. I really deeply think that there is some very deep learning we make as humanity when we learn to care for women's bodies. That is the same learning we need to care for the planet. So for me, it's a very powerful and fundamental link.
Some investments chase returns, others shift reality. Welcome to Blindspot Capital, the show where we trace the capital flows, structural decisions, and invisible forces shaping the future of health. We go deep on what's overlooked, underfunded, or misunderstood, especially where women's health, longevity, and AI intersect. Because this isn't just about the next big trend, it's about who gets seen and who gets funded. All right, so welcome back to Blindspot Capital, the podcast where we decode what gets funded, what gets forgotten, and why. I am your host, Marianne, and today's guest is someone who didn't just build a company. She named an entire category. My guest is Ida Tin. She is the co-founder and former CEO and chairwoman of Clue, the most trusted female health app with over 10 million active users in more than 190 countries. She also coined the term Femtech in 2016, a word that gave shape to $1 trillion future that most of the world hadn't seen coming. And now she's launching Femtech Assembly, a global think tank to reframe women's health as what it really is, the infrastructure of thriving societies. But this episode today, we're not going to talk about, it's not about legacy. It's about language. It's about power. And it's about the quiet, painful wait before the world catches on. So if you're ready, we're ready. Ida, welcome to the show.
Thank you so much. I'm really excited to be here. Thank you so much for having me.
Thank you so much for being here. So Ida, let's dive into it. So what was the moment that you realized that Clue wasn't just a product, but the beginning of a movement?
I could see that there was so much user love coming back. And what they loved, I think, was not necessarily an app, but it was this feeling of like, oh, there's somebody who cares about me. There's somebody that sees me. There's somebody that supports me in these things that is so difficult for people that look like me, but also people that look more like you, or that people look like something third or in between genders. So there was a lot of people who felt a kind of home of some sort, I think. But what I initially was thinking, coining the term, was not so much actually the work that we were doing in Clue. It was the sense of, oh, we are many people who are doing something in women's health, and together we are a new sector. It was the sense of there's something moving in the tech world, like a bigger groundswell. And I wanted to give that name because each of us individually often met this sense of like, oh, you're building some little something over there. And it's actually a little bit embarrassing. I was like, no, but together we are addressing a huge part of life, which is women's lives regarding their bodies.
You've touched on something. You said it was the feedback you were getting when it made you realize that actually you're solving something far bigger than what maybe you even set out to do. That's an interesting observation because you go in, you start out, you build a tool, you build an app, and suddenly you're kind of like holding a mirror, to the whole system. And I think this also gave you the desire to coin a word that shone a light to, what people in the ecosystem were trying to do. And I think in doing that, coining the word Femtech, you gave us language. What did that unlock? And maybe also on the flip side, what did it unintentionally limit?
Yeah, I think I came to this idea from also a very sort of practical, pragmatic angle first. It was, when you go pitch to a fund, then on Monday, the person you spoke to have to present it to his team. It was typically a he. And I thought, if he can say, I'm looking at this Femtech investment opportunity, that would be a lot easier than saying, I'm looking at this period tracking app.
Yep.
So there was something about, it's like, in a way, bridging over to men and making it easy for them to care and invest and be interested in women's health as part of tech. So there was that part, but I think it has helped people find each other. It has helped people who are interested in this field connect. It has created more social proof. I mean, I think it has created more space in culture. I can see that innovation tends to come in where there is something new that has become visible or possible in our culture. The things that are too taboo, not much innovation is going to happen there. But then if suddenly it's like, oh, we can talk about periods, then people start coming up with, looking at menstrual blood for biomarkers or tampons with CBD oils or period unrest, like all kind of things. So I think that's what it has unlocked. I think what it has unintentionally limited is, this conversation, which is why must something be specific female when it should just be human? Why must we create this special container over here for anybody to care about something when really we should just be part of clinical trials? We should just be thought about when we build a new car or come up with a new protocol for some disease detection. But the fact is, we're not. So in an ideal world, I don't think we would need the word, but we live not in an ideal world, very far from it. The debate about, does it limit? Why must it be gendered? I think that's a good conversation to have. And maybe somebody say, which was the case, women's health is not only reproductive health, it's also our brain health, it's our mental health, it's our bone health, it's our cardiovascular health. It's like, yes, you're right. And so we should start talking about that as being part of Femtech too. Because again, if you look at something like autoimmune diseases, well, it is gendered. It does matter which gender you have. We can't ignore it. And if people forget it, if we don't say it, we have to keep saying it. And one way of saying it is putting it under this term. Yeah.
You're absolutely right when you talked about the fact that naming something makes it visible. It's not just, I'm building a period care product or I'm building this, but it's, it gives it almost legitimacy if you like. I think the other thing that you touched on, and I want to expand on that a little bit, is the fact that sometimes language also invites boxes. So you just kind of put something in a box and you don't think sort of outside the box. And I guess the question I'm thinking about is, did it sometimes feel like it narrowed the way others perceive maybe your work or the work of other founders who are building in women's health?
It's a good question. Maybe. It's hard to know what people are thinking. But I know that it went from something that was then worse, I guess. I don't know how many times I walked into a room of other startup CEOs and they're building, blockchain technology and this, that. And it's like, oh, you're building a period tracking app? It's just this sort of, bleh.
Yeah.
I feel that Femtech is like, it's one up. Maybe it's not on the level of AI. And I see female founders, or I guess all founders in Femtech, they kind of, they'll say, we're building this product in women's health using AI, or, we try to kind of lift it in different ways. But then we are also responsible for creating language that does resonate. I'm thinking a lot about this framing of women's health being societal infrastructure.
Yep.
And it does have a different ring. And it brings it up on a level where it's like, oh, yeah, our political leadership should talk about female health because it's societal infrastructure. There's something about thinking from your own startup to a sector to how does the sector actually sit in society that I think is really powerful, I guess.
Yeah. I share that sentiment. I think it's a powerful reframing if we think of language as not just descriptive, but directive. It tells the market what to value, what to ignore. I love the framing of women's health as societal infrastructure. I definitely see it that way as well. And we'll come back to that in a minute because I want to explore that a bit further with you. But I think maybe if we just move track a little bit, because you built Clue, you took it so far, and then you stepped away from Clue at a time when it had become a household name. So you coined the term Femtech, you legitimized even the sector, you built Clue to a household name, and then you stepped away. I think that couldn't have been easy. What made you do it? And I guess if you had the chance, what might you do differently now?
It was a combination of different things. I think deep in my belly, I had this sense of like, I was a bit tired maybe, but I could see that the future for Clue was kind of growing up where the really operational part was getting very important. And I knew I wasn't so good at it. Maybe I wasn't so interested in it. I mean, as a startup CEO, you have a new job every day and you have to grow with the job.
Yes.
So it's not like I was good at anything from the beginning, but you're like, oh, you learn and you learn really fast. But I wasn't excited about learning what I would have had to learn. I don't like Excel sheets. It's like, it's not my thing. And others are much better at that than me. And there had been some changes on the management team. So it was this moment of, do I hire a new COO, or is this then the moment where a new CEO could come in? And the board sent me an email and was like, is this the moment? And I was a bit like, what? But I knew in my heart, I had already come to the same conclusion. So it was like this, yes, they are right. And it was not so easy, but I didn't like the way it was done. And, there are details, but deep in my heart, I knew like, yeah, I do want to step away.
Yes.
And then also, I was super lucky because I got to choose who came after me. And that was amazing because I so trusted these new 2 co-CEOs that I hired that had been on my management team. I'd worked with them for years. I really trusted them. So I felt like a lucky person. I had started with nothing, just an idea. And now I could hand over this whole thing,
Yes.
It was like, here, take, So it was actually a happy thing. And then I see that for many people, it's very challenging when your identity is then, what are you then? I was very lucky. I could just say no to everything and just focus on my own transition for quite a long time.
Yeah.
And dive back in when I was kind of ready.
Yeah.
Took 2 years.
And I ask because, there is this sort of myth around founders that stepping back is failure or that it means that the story is over. But I think what I see in you is someone who saw that the next chapter needed a different kind of leadership, which is what you've articulated, not just operational, but maybe also, in taking it on the next leg of the journey. And that is something that I think I deeply admire. And I wish that we have more leaders who, have this sort of reflection and self-awareness and thinking about what is best for the company. What does it need right now? And what do I need right now? So that's really what I see. Someone who, saw that the next chapter needs a different kind of leadership. And like you said, it took you 2 years to get to your next thing. So I want to talk about your next thing. I want to talk about Femtech Assembly. So you've started this new chapter, Femtech Assembly. So first of all, tell us a bit about Femtech Assembly. And actually, I want to get deep into it. What convinced you that this needed to exist now, not someday, not once the market was more mature, but now?
So Femtech Assembly came out of my desire to try and work on sort of systemic level. Because as I know that one of the big kind of challenges in Femtech is that there is very little later stage capital for people who have already built amazing things, but they need money to really scale it. And I had spent a lot of time talking one-on-one and, with founders. And I had also gotten to speak to a lot of investors, and somebody maybe thought I could be an investor. And I like all these different places in the ecosystem. But I thought what's really missing is actually just a very simple thing, which is to make people see the link between if you invest into women's health, you will make money and the planet will be a healthier place. I really deeply think that there is some very deep learning we make as humanity when we learn to care for women's bodies. That is the same learning we need to care for the planet. So for me, it's a very powerful and fundamental link. Invest more into women's health. You will make money. Society will save money and will be better off. So I want to somehow work on that level. And I was traveling around the world for several years and meeting people. And then I realized I'm actually doing the kind of work you would do in a think tank. So then I thought, okay, I'll create this container around myself.
Mm-hmm.
And I'm at this place where a lot of people have said, oh, I'd love to, be part or help, or I'm really curious about getting into Femtech. I was like, how do you channel all that amazing energy and skill and resources that so many brilliant people have and somehow give us a shared voice that can be stronger? But the challenge I'm sitting with right now that I haven't quite figured out is how do I do that without spending a lot of energy on creating an organization? I don't necessarily want to lead a team,
Yes.
We all need to spend our energy out doing this work, not being busy building an organization. So I'm thinking of it a little bit more as a sort of a social movement, almost like a hashtag. And I haven't quite, it hasn't quite clicked yet, but that's my ambition.
Yeah. And it's interesting because you've moved from building a company to building sort of like a platform or a movement. And in my mind, I'm just wondering, I'm thinking, what mindset shift that needs, like moving from the founder mindset to the movement builder mind. What does that need? Or, how do you make that transition? But as you said, you're still trying to figure it out.
Yeah, but I think how to make it operational, I haven't quite figured out, but it's an interesting question you're asking. And what comes up in my mind is that I try to do the same with the company.
Yes.
I wanted to solve an issue I saw in the world. And the first one was like, why has there been no innovation in family planning methods?
Yep.
That's absurd. And then it was like, oh, wow, when we collect data on women's reproductive health, we can do so much.
Yes.
We can do science. And now I can see, this sector in society can do so much for society. So it's in a way, it's exactly the same. It's just a different scale. And it's not to say that building one product is less valuable than working on systemic things. We need every part on all scales.
Absolutely.
It's just that somehow my life has formed that somehow I can maybe, if I'm lucky and if I do it right, have some impact on a sort of system level. And that's not so easy, right? You have to somehow be very privileged, lucky to be invited into some of these places where it happens. So I feel this responsibility of like, if I can do it, if I've somehow been gifted this opportunity, I feel I must also do it.
Would you say this is your act of legacy building, or maybe the platform you always wished you had when you were founding Clue?
No, I didn't think about that at all. I mean, of course, we all have egos. It makes you happy if somebody says that you have a legacy, but in a way, it's not so important. What's important is that something changed in the world. And like one idea I have, for instance, which I'd love to hear your take on, because you know so much more about the financial sector than I do, but I was randomly, this is a good example of my life, I was randomly invited to this dinner that JP Morgan had organized, and it was their infrastructure fund. And they were telling about this fund. They were investing into, electricity grids and pipelines and these things. And I was sitting there thinking, wait, women's bodies is like full of tubes. It's one big grid. And this is where our energy runs through so that our energy can go into society and we can participate fully in society. Why is nobody maintaining our energy grid? It's our bodies together with our healthcare systems, our medication, all this. And so I thought, why isn't there a dedicated infrastructure fund for women's health? All these men, and they were all men in suits, why don't they get together, raise, €1 billion or more, and they all invest into women's health? To my knowledge, doesn't exist. That's the kind of questions I ask. And if that could happen, that would be my legacy, that it just happened.
Yeah, you're right. It's something that I have often also sat with and thought about the exact same thing many times. I think I've even written some articles on the thought that, if we think about infrastructure, we think about roads get funded, right? Bridges get funded. I mean, even broadband gets labeled as infrastructure, but menstrual care, postpartum care, hormonal health, they're still seen as personal issues, as optional, as emotional, as not strategic. But I think the reality is that if women's health breaks down, everything downstream breaks with it. Her career, her workforce participation goes down, her family stability, her economic contribution. I think McKinsey wrote that there's almost like $1 trillion of economic value that can be unlocked if we actually focus on women's health through gains in workforce participation, in higher productivity, and in lower cost or reduced cost of healthcare. I think that's not a side issue. That's infrastructure. But I think the issue is because women's bodies have been pathologized or minimized for so long, for various reasons, historically, women have been excluded from every sort of serious capital flow, not because they're risky, but just because they weren't even seen. So I guess, my thought is, and that's why, for me, it's really important that I think we started in 2016 with the naming of the sector that encompasses issues with women with the word Femtech. And that gives it sort of visibility. I think from there on, we then need to work on, legitimacy issues. We need to, as you said, make it more seen, make it more visible, make it legible, make it investable. And I think until we start showing up in those rooms, not as a footnote, but as a framework, we're going to keep mistaking absence for irrelevance. And it's not. I fully agree with you. It is infrastructure.
Sometimes I think that it starts with something very human, which is if you haven't experienced it on your own body, it's really hard to understand.
Yeah.
And it's hard to care until you have this conviction in your body that we have, because we've lived it, we've seen it, we have, our ancestry, we know our history. It's that we don't need any convictions. We know. But how does this guy sitting next to us, how does he know? And I think in culture right now, there is too little sharing of what does it actually feel like to have a woman's body.
Yes.
And, I have experienced over and over that men, they do want to know. They do want to care. But they're like, oh, I had no idea. I didn't know. It's complete black box for them. So I think it's also in women to share where it's safe and where it's, there is trust. And then the other side of that is that actually many men also have a story about a woman's body, right? You mentioned earlier, a colleague with 3 daughters, then suddenly it becomes close to heart.
Yes.
But in our culture, there is no space for men to tell the story about what did it feel like when my partner had an abortion and I was so heartbroken.
Yes.
What did it feel like when my mother had breast cancer?
Yes.
All these stories. So I just think it's so human. And also when men are sitting, and are they going to make that investment? Do they have the courage to trust somebody sitting across them that tells about something they don't know? Do they have the courage to stand up as a man and say, yes, I do care about preeclampsia? Do they have the heart? Do they have the culture where they can be vulnerable and say, oh, wow, that really moved me? We need structure, but we also need culture.
Yeah, no, you're right. And you've said, I just want to pick up on something you've said, because I think that's really important to go deeper into it. You said before that men do care, but sometimes they don't always know. They don't have actually that awareness. And that really struck me because so much of the capital still sits with men. And if we want to scale this movement, we can't just preach to the choir. So I think the question is, how, and I know this is work that you're doing, Ida, how do you talk to men in a way that actually lands? What language opens the door?
But first, I want to acknowledge that we are working through layers and layers and layers of cultural disconnect, of hurt, of violence, of all these things. And there are reasons why women don't always share, because it's not safe. And in workplaces, there are many places where you will get punished if you say, I have period pains, instead of saying I have a headache. So I want to first acknowledge that. But so where it's possible and where it's safe, I think we have to somehow actually have the courage to say, you know what, this is what it feels like to be me in my body.
Yes.
And be able to say it and say, no, it's not just me. It is biology. Or it's because I gave birth.
Yeah.
I have scars. I have damages because I did this work of creating a human being. So remove our own shame somehow also.
Yes.
Right? Because I think women also have their own inner work to do. But then I think you talk in a way where you don't say, I had this experience and you'll never understand.
Yeah.
It's very easy to push people away. It's to say, look at this data. Come look at it together with me. Because you are good at understanding data. You invite in, or, if you're a founder, you talk about these things of brand and data safety and privacy and things where men can participate fully with you in the conversation.
Yes. Is this what you write about in your upcoming book? Will you touch on this aspect?
Yes, I will.
When is the book coming?
I still don't know. I want to just say one thing more about the bridge building over to men's world. I think it's totally okay. Women need to be very pragmatic. Maybe it's having a male co-founder. I think that was a huge help for me building Crew. Maybe it is coming up with new words that make it easier. Maybe it's putting something that is actually deep human relational understanding into something we can call a framework.
Yeah.
We need many different kinds of framework, but maybe that's one kind of framework, etc.
Yeah. What are you hopeful about?
I'm hopeful about women's strength because women are so strong. I mean, this whole sector is fueled by business opportunity and by real needs, but also by real anger. We are so tired of being ignored and dismissed and abused and all of it. And so women, they are building the technology that they need. They're tired of waiting, and they're doing it everywhere around the globe, places where it's almost impossible. And somehow they still try.
Yes.
And it can be very emotionally taxing and exhausting. But I see that we can support each other. We can come together. People who have come a little bit further in the journey in some parts of the world can support people who are starting out in other parts of the world. And I have a lot of hope in women. There is not going back on, oh, yeah, we don't have to be included in medical trials, or nobody has to care about our endometriosis. Like, that's not going to happen.
Yes.
We know that we must get better care, and we want tech to not overlook us.
Yes.
So I think I'm really hopeful that there is this massive energy, resilience, commitment, conviction in women and men. Some men, there is definitely also men building in Femtech who is sort of doing in ways that I don't think is cool.
Yeah.
But there is also many good men really doing it on eye level with women. So that gives me hope, because I think we need men to care. They are still the ones writing the checks, etc., writing the laws, building the culture. But I'm hopeful.
Wow. Wow, Ida, you said something towards the early part of this podcast. You said something that when you named Femtech, it wasn't about branding. It was more about visibility, about giving legitimacy to something that you and several other people were working on. And that really hit me, because I think so often in women's health, we're not just talking about sort of like overlooked markets. We're talking about what happens when systems don't make space for our realities. And I think what I take away from this conversation is that language matters, awareness matters. We need to, share, and create this awareness to men who we need as co-authors on this women's health journey. But I think above all that infrastructure matters. And maybe also persistence. You've talked about women's strength, and that persistence matters. Ida, thank you. Thank you really for carrying the weight, for giving us words, and for building platforms that will outlast any one product.
Well, we're doing it all together. Thank you so much, really, for you doing your work. It's brilliant.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Now, for everyone listening, if this conversation moved you, I want you to check out Femtech Assembly, check out the movement, be part of the movement. It's not just for women, it's women and men. It's all of us, because women's health is infrastructure. And we're going to keep an eye out, Ida, for your upcoming book.
Thank you so much.
So we will link Femtech Assembly in the show notes so you can find it there. And for those of you who are working in women's health, know this, you are not too early. You're just right in time. And until next time, keep looking out for the blind spots. And when you find those blind spots, then bring a flashlight. Ida, great to have you on the show. Thank you so much.
My pleasure.
That's it for this episode of Blindspot Capital. If you learned something, share it. And if you're building something, reach out. And if you're investing in the future, make sure you're not doing it blind.